Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things, well, not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of ChiroHealth USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Our guest today is Aaron Reynolds, a seasoned revenue generation and entrepreneurship expert. Aaron's journey has been remarkable, with a career that began at 12, knocking on doors. Old-time salesman there, Aaron. In 2015, Aaron founded SalesWorks, a consulting firm specializing in entrepreneurial ventures, where he continues to guide companies to success, including ChiroHealth USA. But beyond his business endeavors, Aaron is deeply passionate about mentoring and empowering others to discover their unique superpower. And more importantly, Aaron's my friend. He's my mentor and a guy who has made a big difference in my life and the lives of our team here at ChiroSphere. Today he's going to share some insights, strategies, and his infectious enthusiasm for helping others thrive in their entrepreneurial pursuits. Well, let's start with your why, Aaron. I know we're both fans of Simon Sinek. You've been with ChiroSphere for about 10 years now, which blows my mind, but you've been in chiropractic much longer, more on the software side. And as we've discussed, chiropractic's not an easy profession to sell in or to. So what drives your work and passion for the chiropractic profession? A lot of people would have said, to heck with this, I'm going to another field.
First, thanks for having me. And I appreciate the kind words, and the feeling is mutual. Just thinking about spending some time together this morning, I thought about how long, our paths have been intertwined and what we've been able to accomplish. And I couldn't agree more. You've been a great friend and mentor to me, and I'm excited to share. And I think that that's actually part of what keeps me passionate about working in this particular profession. I naturally come from the land of broken toys. Nothing has really come easy in life. And so I've been fortunate enough to have great people or great mentors around me that have helped remove certain roadblocks at the right time to clear the path for me to learn, to grow, and to feel success. And when I first was introduced to chiropractic from a business perspective, not from a patient perspective, I saw a lot of the same challenges kind of on a much larger macro scale that I was fighting on a micro scale. I wanted my work to be validated. I wanted the impact that I was having on people to be shown to everybody else. I wanted to share the magic, if you will. And I saw that right out of the gate. As a matter of fact, my first year traveling in chiropractic, I kind of had this revelation. Every doctor I spoke with or every patient I spoke with, they had a story about how the patient loved their chiropractor. And I started thinking about that, and very rarely do we say, I love my dentist or I love my eye doctor, but you love your chiropractor. You create this intimate relationship over time. And what I realized is the average person needed access to chiropractic care. And I just became passionate about helping, ultimately, my friends communicate value in a slightly different way. If you look at data points out there, and you and I both know this, we've spent so much time together. Out of every 10 people, no matter where we've come from, only about 3 of us are truly naturally wired to be entrepreneurs, which means that 70% of this profession is swimming upstream against their natural tendency. And we see that on a daily basis, the struggle with running true businesses because of the true business challenges and the limited resources. All of those things come into my brain, and it's just a puzzle that wants to be solved. So it's a long answer, but that's kind of where the passion comes from. I think we can get there. We just have to share resources and best practices in a different way.
Yep. It's been interesting. I know we read a lot of the same books and have over the years, but then I think started me on the path to begin to think of practice more as a business. Michael Gerber's book, the email. Clearly, we go through chiropractic college and we get our technical skills. And so we're great technicians at what we do. As I've said recently, most chiropractors are in practice, but they're not in business. I've said this repeated. I don't give a damn how good of a chiropractor you are. If you can't run a profitable business, you cannot help people. If there is not enough money, you cannot help enough people. So it is certainly a topic that we've discussed an awful lot. And I know we're going to get some tidbits today to doctors that are on this. And, the reality is this podcast could go for like a day or so, right, Aaron? So we're going to hit some of the highlights and then probably come back at some point and really get into the weeds, as they say. So let's take a few minutes and talk about a book that may be in the works. Two Broke Knees. That's a catchy but painful title. I've seen you experience some challenges that would make most people give in or give up completely. immediately and play woe is me. But what I've observed is not only have you overcome the challenges, but you've come out on the other side stronger, more focused, and impactful in all that you do. So tell us about your two broke knees, brother.
It's funny. I remember still sending the text. I'm giving a thumbs up laying in the hospital bed. I sent you a text. I was like, hey, had a small accident. No big deal. 6 weeks and I'll be back. Well, here we are coming up on 5 years, and what I realize is it's a permanent shift in the way that I live. You're right. July 4th, 2019, doing a routine jump off the diving board. I play a lot of sports. I'm a pretty big dude, and so I put a lot of pressure on my joints and my tendons through the years. But my ego, here I am in my mid-50s, and I have to show my kids I can still do a front flip. I can still do a back flip. I mean, look at me. And my rule was always I'm going to go off the diving board twice. And this particular day, I went a third time. And on that third jump, both of my legs literally exploded. The right patella tendon going into mop-like shreds and having to be sewn together mid-substance, and the left with an avulsion fracture to the kneecap and those tears again. And what was interesting is I thought originally 6 weeks. I've played sports, I've torn a tendon, let's get this thing going and we'll rehab. I had no idea what was coming. And what was coming was I had at least 6 to 8 weeks of bed rest, non-weight bearing, if I was ever going to walk again. And then the long rehab. And Ray, I had a gift. I don't know where it came from. I can't tell you why these things popped into my head, but I immediately went into rehab mode mentally. And the words that kept coming to me were patience, grace, and discipline, and acceptance. And that acceptance one was key because I didn't have enough energy to dwell on why it happened. I needed all my energy to focus on where I needed to go. And I knew this was an injury of physics. My kids are now 14 and 12. At the time, obviously, 7 and 9. And I knew if I wanted to be a father, I had to give everything I had to being the best version I could be coming out of this. I wanted them to watch me handle it with grace. I wanted to be the best patient I could be because my wife had to take care of me. You talked about the for better or for worse. We got into the for worse. We won't go into detail on that today, but we got into the for worse. I knew that I had to be more disciplined than I'd ever been. And one of the nice parts about having natural gifts is it allows you to sometimes not be as disciplined as you'd like to be. And the only way to come back from this type of an injury was to be absolutely disciplined. And then I needed to be patient. And honestly, to this day, I still need to be patient because I'm reminded on a daily basis of things I can't do. But to your point, the gifts I've been given on the other side of it were so unexpected. Truly the greatest gift I've ever been given. I'm glad it happened in my 40s. Fingers crossed, I live a long life where I can kind of reap the rewards of that pivot in life, that pivot of taking, of not necessarily always using the skills for good, of not always appreciating what you're bringing in, but really switching the thought process to say, how do I want to leave the world? What do I want to contribute? What's my value set? What really is important to me? I promise you, laying in bed for 8 weeks not moving, you're going to go through a lot of those thoughts. What really is important? For me, it was friends and family in my future. And I wanted to be able to live free enough to travel, but that's really what it was. It was a mindset. It truly was a mindset. This thing is either going to kill me or I'm going to come out of it stronger. And that's really what I had to grapple with.
It is, we've had this conversation before too, when things happen that we don't expect, we have one of two choices. We can either respond to it or we can react to it. And as you well know, working with me for so long, there was a time when something went wrong and I'm just going to light somebody up, or I'm going to blow it up. And so that is definitely something that I have learned from you is take a moment, take a deep breath, let some grace slip in and give people benefit of the doubt or situations. That really, really has been a great takeaway from for me. You said you don't know where you got it from. I got a feeling maybe you do know where you got it from. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. Who's your hero, Aaron?
Oh, I would say in this world, it has to be my mother. I was adopted. I have a really strange story. I'm one of 4 siblings. 3 of the 4 of them grew up together. My 2 older brothers and my younger sister. I was put up for adoption for a whole host of reasons we don't have time for today. It was a gift of the universe. My mother couldn't have children, and and we grew up together. She adopted me and was a single mother up until she married my stepdad when I was 12 or 13. And then he was equally as impactful, especially from a sales mentorship standpoint, really truly one of the best salespeople and business people I know. But, my mom, just a little bit about her, when I wanted to play basketball, she's up on a ladder hanging the basketball hoop. And this is 19. And when I wanted to play football, she had a neighbor show her how to throw a football so she could show me how to throw a football. And those are just little things that happen. And I'll tell you one of the best gifts I've ever been given, and we will take it off script. 1980, the very first pair of Air Jordans came out, and we talked about me knocking door to door. And so, of course, I'd done lawn mowing gigs at $5 a pop back in the day, and maybe $3 because it's 70s and 80s. And I wanted more money faster, so I got a newspaper route, because that's where before you're 14, you could make some real money legally.
That's where I started.
Yeah, and it still wasn't coming fast enough. These pair of Air Jordans were coming out, and I wanted them. And before that, for any of you who know shoes, I had 4-stripe Adidas. And if you know Adidas, they have 3 stripes. So I really didn't have Adidas. I had whatever version we could afford of the closest imitation shoe. This was going to be my first big shoe. And my mom said, Aaron, if you can earn half the money legally, I will. And that's important.
That's a story for another day.
I did. Good cop, bad cop. If she knew I was creative, if you just throw it out there with, can you earn half the, I'll earn half the money. So anyway, if you can earn half of it legally, I'll pay the other half. And that's where $3 a pop, knocking on doors, signing people up for the Des Moines Register, and I paid for my shoes in a week as a 12-year-old. And it never occurred to me when the people told me no that was a bad thing, because all I was waiting for was the people to get to yes so I could get to my shoes. And so I was naturally wired that way. Little did I know, and I don't even think she knew at the time, what she had taught me, which was, with a little bit of effort and work, I can get anything I want. I just have to put some thought into it. And the other thing that happened out of that is, the number one words kids hear is no. And that's why we stop laughing. And we stop laughing and we stop learning. And all those things happen as we get older. And we look at our kids and we're amazed by them. They bring us joy because we remember what that was like. Well, I wasn't hearing no at the same rate. I was hearing no for other reasons, but not when it came to trying to move things forward. What I heard was how and why. How and why. And so everything I started to approach for the rest of my life became how and why. I'd like to get there. All right, well, how and why? And then my stepdad came in and he topped it off with, every time I presented him with a plan, I had to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C.
So that's where it came from then.
There it is.
I knew there was a source of that. You've heard me quote Zig Ziglar many a time when he says, you can have anything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And, I think that's probably one of the things your mom instilled in you through those actions. The other thing that we have in common that we've talked about is, I had parents that never told me there was something that I couldn't do. And so when I look over my life and things that I've accomplished, it's like I did it out of ignorance. Nobody told me I couldn't do it. And so you start going down paths and doing things that, in retrospect, or when other people look at it, say, wow, how did they accomplish that? And that really is a powerful lesson, is especially for those of us that have kids and grandkids, instill that into them that they can accomplish, they can do, because you're right. I mean, literally from the time they get up in the morning, they hear, no, don't do this, don't do that. They get ABCs and Fs on their homework, and we focus on the F and don't give them enough of that positive reinforcement. So that's a great takeaway.
Well, and one quick thing with that is, when you're dealing with people, everybody has a superpower. And we talked about this earlier, but as I've gotten older, institutional learning tends to favor one kind of superpower. To your point, you get an A, you're great. You get an F, you're terrible. But the fact is that's just not true. Every single person has a superpower. You may stink at algebra, and you may get a piece of wood in front of you and put out the most beautiful piece of woodwork we've ever seen. And I think one of the things that I've enjoyed through life is getting to know and mentor so many people, is really trying to find that superpower. Everybody has one. Our job as leaders is to figure out what it is and then help them exploit it in some way, shape, or form. And so often we live in a world that says, well, you don't follow this institutional path that you should, that means you're less than. No, you're just different. That's all. And that's really empowering to know.
Yeah. When I look at the years in practice and CAs that I would have, the institutional path was, you start out as a CA, you're doing some menial stuff at first, and then you get involved in therapy, and then you might become my scribe in the room with the patients. And now and you're so wonderful with patients. I mean, you're just on fire when you do that. So what do?
You're making a manager.
Owner, I'm going to move you to the front desk in insurance. And I literally did that with a young lady, Tony, that worked for me, unbelievable CA, unbelievable employee. And I rewarded her with, okay, now you're going to run the front desk and be over insurance. And almost every day at the end of the day, she's crying her eyes out. And I'm going like, what's the deal? Because, and what was crazy is she wanted to run the front desk and do insurance. And so I was rewarding her, but I did not put her in her gifting. And, you know, and I know everybody who's involved with CHUSA knows about Christy. And we've had this conversation publicly, so it's not news. Christy was another employee who was really, really good at some things, but she also liked bright, shiny objects. And then we had her migrate or ask her to migrate into an area and that really wasn't her gifting. And she was on the chopping block. I mean, when we would have our quarterly and annual meetings, what are we going to do about Christy? What are we going to do about Christy? And it was really, Christy wasn't the problem. I was the problem because I was having a difficult time really recognizing where she excelled, but yet expecting her to step into this other area. And, you know, the famous quote I got from her is, "This crushes my soul."
Yeah.
You know, if I can't get it after hearing those words and say, okay, maybe Christy's not the issue, it is management, it is me. And, you know, that has really made a big difference, I think, for us and the people in our company is right person in the right seat, doing the right things. And sometimes we as owners and managers kind of we really get that wrong. And we think the path from, say, CA to front desk to office manager is what everybody wants. And they may think it's what they want, but you really have to look at where do you see them excel, and are they drained at the end of the day? Or are they inspired at the end of the day, or still positive and upbeat, and make sure we match those people up with the right job and position.
And let's dive into that for a half a second, kind of from a nugget standpoint. If you, again, data is interesting. And the more we're out there, the more we have data. Again, you and I read a lot of the same books. Adam Grant's Think Again is a great one for anyone listening because it's going to challenge what you think, hence Think Again. And for those of us who trust our gut, me, what it really says is that I'm probably wrong more than I'm right. Now, some of us are better than others as we go through it, but we need to start looking at the data. And so when we're looking at employees, especially from a small business standpoint, one of the areas we fall down is we tend to look at everybody else and say, well, I did it, you can do it too. I was able to get through this, why can't you? But the data tells us only 1 out of 3 can follow your path. If you take a look at Patrick Lencioni's 6 Types of Working Genius, we each have 2. No matter how special we think we are, and as you've heard me say a million times, you know, my narcissism is special. When someone told me I was only going to have 2 of the 6 Types of Working Genius, my first thought was, that's just not true. I have all 6. I'm all 6. I am super. But the reality is, I have 2. And that means out of these 6 things, there are 2 things I love and 2 things I'm good at and 2 things that I just shouldn't do. And as small businesses, we don't find those data points to recognize when we're giving people the 2 things that they just shouldn't do. And what the data tells us is 1/3 of the tasks out there are soul crushing to any employee at any given time. You need to know what they are. So you have to look inward and ask yourself, do I really know what's going to tear that person down today to get less than? Because when you put someone in their wheelhouse, they can do the work of 5 people and not be tired. But you put them in that soul crushing phase, they'll barely get the job done and take everybody else down with them. And that's a leadership issue.
Yeah, it really is. You know, that is such an important takeaway for people. You know, we as chiropractors, we were trained. We do our own exams. We do our own x-rays. We do our own therapy. We were islands, basically.
Yes.
And, you know, the challenge with running a practice, particularly a solo practice that really hasn't evolved to the point where it's truly a business where you have departments is, as a chiropractor, I mean, early on, I mean, my wife, Jean, and I, we'd go in, start seeing patients 7 in the morning. We wouldn't leave till 7 in the evening. My God, I mean, it's like, why in the hell did we do that for so long? Because I didn't know any better. Well, why was it taking so long? Because I was a chiropractor. I was a business guy. I was the marketing guy. I was trying to do everything, thinking, well, I'll wait till I get busier and hire someone to do those things. And some of the stuff you really suck at. And you're right, it is soul crushing. And so it really takes all the joy of what you're really good at. You know, we see the same thing happening in the compliance side of practice. There's not there's not a chiropractor I know that loves compliance. Well, there's a
Oh,
few weirdos
terrible.
out there. Yeah, I went and got my certification as a medical compliance specialist, and as I've jokingly said, it made me want to be a damn Walmart greeter, man. It's just like I don't want to do this crap. I want this crap out of my office. And so, as chiropractors or anybody in business, find the highest and best use of your time and do your damnedest to only do that. When my hands are on patients, I'm generating revenue. When they're not on patients, I am wasting time. And if you don't think you can afford to hire someone, you can't afford not to hire them because it's taking away from your ability to generate revenue. So, as Steve Harvey said, sometimes you just got to take a leap of faith, man, and do it, and things will work out. So
Well,
we're going to.
you've got to know your numbers too. And I know we're
We'll get to
flying
that
on.
when we come back. We're going to take about a 30-second break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back in a few seconds with Aaron Reynolds. Welcome back, everybody. We're here with my dear friend, Aaron Reynolds, a mentor of mine and the guy who's made a lot of difference in my life, as I said earlier. And we're going to pivot a little bit here. We were talking recently, and as I said earlier, a lot of doctors are in practice, but they're not necessarily in business. And the reality is we don't get a lot of that in schools, but really, and we beat up on the colleges sometimes that they don't really teach business. But let's face it, that's not their job. Their job is to get you a degree and make you a competent and effective chiropractor. And so I'll challenge all the docs out there listening to this. Just because you got your DC degree doesn't qualify you to run a practice. You really should find a mentor, find a coach, find someone who's, as Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues. And so find someone who's doing what you would like to do. I have yet to meet someone who is very successful and an entrepreneur that will not sit down with you and share. In fact, most of them love it.
Absolutely.
So, Aaron, you mentioned before we went to break, know your numbers. Kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, everyone's going to approach business in a slightly different way. I approach all business like manufacturing. And I think it starts there. So when you start to think about your business, your practice, I want you to think about the patient journey all the way along through positive outcomes. And that patient journey starts with how do they actually come into your funnel, your pipeline. You do carry a patient pipeline. A healthy chiropractic office has a full funnel always coming in and people working on their behalf as referrers. But regardless if you have to advertise to get there or you have patients referring, you have to look at that funnel and ask yourself, what kind of numbers do I need coming through the door? What kind of a conversion rate of those numbers do I need coming through the door? And then obviously, what kind of patient numbers do I need on a regular basis to make sure that the business is healthy? In order to get to that number, you actually have to know your business costs. What's your overhead? What are your employee costs? What if you're in a larger market? I was in New York City 2 weeks ago with my family for spring break. My daughter played at the trampoline park before flying out and couldn't walk the next day. She had jacked herself truly all up. Well, going into that practice, that was a solo practitioner doctor who was literally in the American Express building. So talk about knowing your overhead, what's going on. His price per square foot, price per square inch was going to be way greater than it's going to be, say, in Jackson. So you have to start to know your numbers so you can build a positive business plan. And then when you start to look at yourself as manufacturing, ask yourself where you excel. Do you excel as a marketer to bring people in on the front end? Do you excel as someone doing a financial report of findings so a patient understands the value of what's going to go on, what their responsibility is, and what they can expect through the care? Do you excel in actually administering, giving the care on a daily basis? By the way, 99% of the people who are going to listen to this fall into that box. That's where you're trained. That's where you're an expert. That's where you're putting in all of your hours. Do you excel at collecting on the back end? Do you excel at helping those patients then who have had positive outcomes become your microphone? And all of these things are self-serving. So you really need to start to look at your business like manufacturing. And what are all of the points where you can break or have a bottleneck where it sits? And then ask yourself, is it a good use of time? So let me step away from chiropractic for a half a second and I'll give you an example that I use regularly.
You're going to go to
Yeah, you know where I'm going. It's my yard. I grew up mowing lawns. It's okay. I don't mind it necessarily, but I travel a lot. And I don't have to travel as much now as I used to, but there was a time 3 out of 4 weeks I was gone. And so when I was home for that week, all of life's chores were waiting for me. They weren't going away. So I
Really
still had
great.
my job to do. Plus, I had all of that work to do. And I started looking at the time for my lawn. And I looked at what it would cost to outsource it. And at that time, it cost me $50 every time the guy showed up, which was once a week for about 12 weeks over the course of a summer. So for you math people, that's $600. That $600 for that 12 hours of time was costing me almost 20-fold that. If you look at generating a business, what the business can do. And so it was a very simple one. I can work for 2 hours. Literally, I can generate an hour's worth of business for my company and pay for all of my lawn care for the summer. And so now it wasn't a burden. It wasn't anything that took up mental space. I didn't dread it coming home. I knew my numbers. So I removed a roadblock for me. I got better service out there. And I'll tell you, there was nothing more satisfying than having maybe a summer adult beverage where I'm watching somebody else cut my grass on one of my free hours, knowing that I was actually profiting to have them do the work because I knew my numbers. So I think the first thing you can do is really start to break down your business as manufacturing and ask yourselves where you're strong and where you're weak. And manufacturing, again, from where the patient hears about you to the first call in, however they get to you, to the first time they walk through your door, to the first time they meet with you, to how they leave, to how you're following up, to how you're nurturing that relationship to get the outcomes you want so they become a referring patient. And then the cycle repeats itself. And this is why healthy practices continue to grow. They're very disciplined in looking at it just from this perspective and lens.
So for those docs that would like to know your numbers, several years back, we created an Excel spreadsheet that is an overhead calculator. And you basically take your services, your office visits, your rent, your basic, business expenses. It's not hard to do. If you've got your last year's tax return, you can get all the information off of that along with your practice stats. And you can literally get down to the point where you realize it cost you maybe $27.27 to deliver an adjustment. And if you're sent contracts from Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, or anybody else, and they want to pay you $17 for a particular service, you're losing $10 every time you see one of those patients. And as I jokingly say, it's like the guy who buys oranges for a dime and sells them for a nickel and wondered why he's not making a profit. The answer is not to get a bigger truck. You're just going to go deeper in the hole.
Yeah.
So, docs, if you don't like seeing certain insured patients because they're not paying very much and you're struggling with, well, should I stay on that panel or in that network? That's an emotional decision just because you don't feel like they're covering your overhead. But if you know your numbers, then it's a business decision. And there are ways that patients can opt out of filing their health insurance. That's one of the things that CHUSA can help you do, is to get away from those lower paying payers. Because, let's face it, they're not even paying you enough to cover your overhead. And so save that space for someone that can and will, or another carrier that might. But you can't make that decision if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your data. That form or that spreadsheet you can actually download at chirohealthusa.com. Just go in there and search for overhead calculator. There's some instructions on that. It'll be eye-opening for a lot of people. No doubt about it. So one of the other things that we talk about, I remember you telling a story of your wife owns a vet clinic, and I know you've spoken to the vet industry on several occasions. And on one of those, it really caught my attention. Someone had asked you, how can they get their front desk people to sell more products, more supplies, and all of that stuff? Well, they're typically vet techs that, much like in my world, I promoted my great CA up to this front desk position, and we wonder, well, why aren't they selling orthotics? Why aren't they pushing the vitamins? Why aren't they pushing this? And you ask a very simple question: have they ever been trained in sales? It's almost like the day when I came to you and said, hey, I need help. I need to hire a sales manager. And he says, why? You don't have any salesmen. I went, smart ass, but you're right. And I didn't. I had hired all office clerical people, and I expected them to be able to do those things. So what are some key points or some ways that doctors who are offering ancillary services, and let's face it, in some practice, they actually do the case presentations to patients. So what are some simple things, some beginner steps, if you will, that doctors can take to where they empower their people? And then more importantly, what kind of people should they be looking for, their
Yeah.
background skills, to where they're making the right hire from someone that can do that? You take someone who doesn't think of them as a salesperson and you ask them to do that, and I mean, they'll just melt down.
Yeah.
So what do we need to look for? What skill set, and what are 2 or 3 basic steps they can take tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so let's start with the basic steps because the hiring is the bigger challenge in today's market. The basic steps, you can start to make those changes immediately. And the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do I have expectation of my team without agreement? So as an owner, we oftentimes say, well, hey, I got this and I expect this of you. But what we don't have from the employee is agreement that they actually know how to do it and can execute. So to your point, I want you to sell add-on, let's say orthotics. I want you to help really prime the pump so we can push orthotics out the door, which are necessary. Well, to the person, to your point, they might hear that, so they know what the expectation is, but the person delivering the message didn't stop and say, so now, Ray, do you understand what I want to get done? Yes. Do you think you can do it? Do you think you can? I don't know. And remember, anything other than yes is a no, by the way. So if someone says, I don't know, that's no. If it's a yes, people will tell you yes. Like, how do you feel today? Do you feel good? Yeah, I feel good. They're going to tell you. How do you feel today? I don't know. I feel okay. That's something's up, right? So we have to be very mindful in that communication. So it starts with expectation and agreement. Can you get the person on the other side of the task that you're asking to agree and reciprocate your messaging back to you so you know that you're in lockstep? The other thing you can do is ask, what roadblocks can I remove? Now, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean that every conversation you have to walk in kind of tail between your legs and afraid to ask for something. It's not that at all. Ask for whatever you want. Just make sure that there's agreement. And if there isn't agreement, you're empowering them, in this case, with basic sales training that goes along the way that says, here's how I make a recommendation. Here's how I do a discovery question. Here's how I find a benefit. There are some assumed benefits, things we know to be true universally. And then there are specific and truly implied benefits that they'll tell us. They'll let us know. So that's one of the ways that we're going to go through it. The other way that we go through it is ask your team their challenges. Hey, we'd like to generate a little bit more here. What are the roadblocks? What are the challenges you see in doing this? Let them tell you the problem, because they already know. And really the only thing between your success, your objective, and them getting there is giving them a safe place to tell you what they're afraid of. Yeah. Because once they tell you what they're afraid of, problem, solution. Now you can go in and sell it and help them better understand how they can sell it as well. So whenever I'm trying to make changes, whether it's in a chiropractic office, whether it's in vet clinics like we own, wherever we start, I always start with the team. I start with the objective that I might see, but I ask them the challenges and how they might solve it. And if, let's say, they have 5 challenges and 2 of the 5 are the same challenges I see, then I try and steer a conversation towards those 2 where we have agreement. I don't want to put the 3 that they don't even recognize, because those might not even be real challenges. They just might be what I see top down. So when you're empowering your team, you actually have to hear what they say are the challenges and start to work through them. This is actually the way that you start to change the course of a business, by the way. If you go say to your front desk team and you say, what are the 2 or 3 challenges we're facing with patients on a daily basis, and let them tell you, they identify them and say, if we're going to work on one of them over the next 30 days, what can we agree on, and work on that one, and come back and do that exercise every 30 days. It's actually a lighter form of the book Traction, which I know you run off of a VOS, but it's a very simple way to let your team tell you the challenges, because they know, by the way, they know what the challenges are. What they don't know is if they can trust the two-way communication channel to tell you. That's what they don't know. And what you want to create is an environment where they are telling you and you're adjusting. So the first thing you can do is really focus on the expectation and agreement. How do we get to agreement? Ask them if they can see the problem, how they might solve the problem, what their thoughts are on the problem. Work through that list. Now, to get to the hiring piece, you know, there was a time that you could stop in sales. The cliche was always hire an athlete because they're competitive and that's where you want to be. Well, back in the day when I first was in sales and it was all kind of boiler room, old school, as you call it, knocking on doors, calling out of a phone book. Yeah, you needed the person who could run into a wall all day. And sadly, I was wired that way. But the reality now is, with this digital age and the way that we're communicating and the way that we're building click funnels and lead gen solutions that are coming in, 60-70% of the buying decision is made before they come in. So I don't need the same kind of salesperson anymore. I now need more of a consultant, someone who can help guide truly honest and sincere and authentic conversations. And so that's the next piece. When I'm looking to hire people, I look for honesty, and it's tough to tell in an interview, but you look for patterns, you look for sincerity. You ask questions that get there, and then you look for authenticity. And what I really love, especially because we're dealing a lot of times with hourly employees, is did they come from the land of broken toys? So have they had pain, and did they get over it at any point in time? How did they deal with it? Because if you can find someone who's dealt with some adversity and they can authentically tell a story how they got over it, you can teach that person. You can teach that person. You can't teach good. You just can't teach good. That's an internal decision. If I want to choose to be good, I am. If I want to choose to be bad, I am. I can't teach that. But what I can do is take someone who wants to be good and help them go from good to great.
Yeah. That is something that I have focused on for years in hiring numerous employees, and not just with ChiroHealth, but in the practice over 35, 38 years. Anybody can fill out an application. And the thing would crack me up is I would ask atypical questions like, who is your hero? I would love it when people say, I'm a people person. And I'm going like, do you have any siblings? Well, yes, I do. I got a brother and 2 sisters. When's the last time y'all all got together? Oh, I don't talk to my brother. I hadn't talked to him in 10 years. And I'm going like, so you're a people person. It's like, or the ones that say, what are some of your positive traits? Well, I'm very neat and organized. Well, when I see that, I intentionally send another employee out to the look in their car, and there's like 4 cups of Burger King, a McDonald's cup, and 3 bags wadded up in the front seat. And I'm going like, I'm not buying what you're selling, that incongruency. But I think it is so critical for people to hire. There's hardly anything in a chiropractic practice that you can't teach someone, unless you're hiring another chiropractor or you got some specialized service. If we would pivot from, oh, great, they can do this or they can do that or they have experience in this. A lot of times what I found is you had to get them to unlearn the way they might have worked in a medical office and work in our office. And it really comes down to hiring for character. And like you said, someone who's been through something, who has experienced some life, hands down. Or I'll tell you something else that I have observed. You can have someone who has had no experience in a doctor's office, and let's face it, there's still a bit of a mindset, oh, I'd love to work in a doctor's office. So you hire someone who would have thought they never would have had a chance to work in an environment like that, and you give them a chance. You're the one that opened the door for them. Oh my God, the loyalty that comes from that. And something else you mentioned, Aaron, when you're talking about the land of broken toys, anybody that has lived any degree of life has had some trauma, something that has kind of molded and made them the way they are. So I think everybody's got some broken toys, or what's referred to in some books as a mama wound or a daddy wound. It is absolutely wonderful and personally satisfying to see someone who has experienced life in a certain way and really doesn't know any other way of dealing with it. And through your encouragement, and sometimes that's all it takes, a little bit of encouragement along the way. And oh my God, does it make such a difference with them? And, I love the ladies that work with us, and it blows my mind sometimes to have them come to me and say, Doc, you remember when you said, and it was just something to me that I might have just said that day. I meant it, but I didn't take it as impactful. And when they come and they got tears in there, it's, Doc, I bought my first brand new car ever, or I had this happen, or I had that happen. One the other day just said, I really bought into what you said, Doc. You can have anything in life you want if you help enough other people help they want. What they get, what they want. And you don't realize the impact of your words and your belief and your trust in someone. It can take them from good to absolutely great.
It's so true in truly everything that we do. Our job as leaders is, if I leave today's audience with anything, look inward. Our job as leaders is to remove roadblocks for people. And so many people that, especially because we're dealing with hourly employees so often, this is the first time they've had to be passionate about something. And our job then is to feed that passion. And then really it's our responsibility to get them to that point where they are not only drinking the Kool-Aid, But one of the things when I do my speeches on leadership is I say this all the time: a leader's not a leader till they create leaders who create leaders. And that's not my phrase, but it's so true. And when you're talking to people and that leadership message starts to cascade all the way down, that's when you know you're running a healthy business. It's know when you're doing it kind of for the right reason in the right way, which I know is really one of the core values at Chiro Health USA, which I absolutely love. You don't do the right things for the right reasons in the right way. It's just to run every decision up against that. Are we really trying to do the right things for the right reasons in the right way? And that's just being a good leader to our people and having the skill set and empowering them and recognizing that we need them and they need us. And a healthy relationship isn't us versus or them versus, it's really working together. And I think that when you take a look at your business that way, start with the benefit of the doubt, look at all of these little things that we've talked about today, you'll be amazed at what your people will do for you. And I know that you're asking me questions, and I don't know if anyone's probably brought this up in your previous podcasts, but you're right, it's reciprocated, because I know on a daily basis, you're in a position now that you're living, quote unquote, the EOS life. And whether it's this project that you're passionate about, or empowering the profession, or increasing utilization through the strategic plan, or setting this profession up to leave it better than when you found it, or when your parents started practicing and it was illegal. All of those things that have had to happen along the way are things that we're doing now, and you practice what you preach. And so, share with your audience what it's like to empower people and what you're feeling today from it.
Wow. It is life-changing. There were a lot of years in practice, and even with starting up Chiro Health, where, again, you're in the technician mode, and so you're having to do everything. The more I have focused on hiring the right person first, more on character and ethics, that is critical, because if you've got someone that you hired that doesn't have the right character, the right mentality, the right ethics, I don't give a damn what you do. It is not going to turn out well. So start there. The other thing is, and as I said earlier, I know we're both fans of Simon Sinek, and one of the things that we heard him say recently is, if you want people to take responsibility, give it to them. And for so many years, I was that's an hourly employee. What are they doing leaning over the counter? With the old saying used to be, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean, meaning do something. Yeah. Well, while we look at the practice as a manufacturing operation, the reality is it's not an assembly line. And so it's not like that used to drive me nuts. Oh, damn, I'm busting my chops. I'm having to pay the bills. Why aren't they doing that? And the reality is, you can micromanage somebody right out of your office. Mm-hmm. But if you tell them what their expectations are, and you don't care how they get there, as long as they're meeting the expectations, they get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do it, and then you leave them alone, they'll do it. Or in pretty short order, you'll find out, well, maybe they don't get it, maybe they don't want it, or they don't have the capacity. And then that's where I famously come in with my banker's box. You ain't got to go home, but you can't stay here. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt up to a period of time. But then, what I've learned is I owe it to all the other employees to surround them with the best people that we can find. And if they aren't the best when they come in, let's coach them up, train them up. And you just got to owe that to the other employees and to the business. And, one of the things that I have come across on numerous occasions when it was easy to find people to hire is, you'd go to a state convention and a doctor say, yeah, I fired 3 CAs last month. And I go, you freaking idiot. And they go, what do you mean? He said, they weren't doing the job. I said, who hired them? You hired them. Did you train them? No, I let my other CA train them. Well, you do that enough times, you get a copy of a bad copy of a bad copy. We've all seen that. Yep. And then you're bitching and moaning about, well, damn, staff are just overhead. They just are an expense. I'll get another one. The trauma that you put yourself, your team, and your practice through because you've got high turnover, because you failed in hiring the right person to begin with, and then you failed to give them the proper training and onboarding, that's your fault.
Agreed.
And docs, if you don't do anything else but get that rock solid team around you and give them responsibility, let them take the responsibility, and then also, be accountable. That's a critical piece of it. You're in for a merry-go-round of just trials and tribulations as it relates to employees. On the flip side, you hire the right person, you train them up right, they've got the right character, they got the right ethics, and oh my God, does your life become unbelievable. And, the other thing that I know we've talked about, Aaron, is you can have the great employees are the ones that leave. The ones that aren't so great will hang around forever. And sometimes they leave over $1. an hour. And I'll hear docs, well, I've never paid a CA more than $12 an hour or $15 an hour. You got somebody that's been with you 5 or 6 years and they want another dollar, $1.50 an hour. It's tooth and dollars. Do you have any idea what it's going to cost you to onboard a brand new person, the disruption in your office, the training up? And it's like, dude, what? You're thinking about it the wrong, they just think about that the wrong way. I want you to touch on one other thing for a minute, Aaron. Clearly, the public out there, the employees out there have changed and what's important to them. 20 years ago, people just wanted a job. They want to be able to work long-term and hopefully retire from it.
Yeah.
And now there's hardly a business that you walk into that doesn't have a, we're hiring sign up. And I know a lot of doctors are struggling with that. What's changed in the younger people, and how do we bring them in when what was important to people 20 years ago is distinctly different? What kind of work environment or work arrangement is making sense to where people will come and work? Or maybe they don't want to work. I saw my parents work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. I work 40, 60 hours a week. And now there are people that just don't want to do that and have that kind of loyalty because they're not going to get the Rolex watch at the end of 40 years.
That's right.
What do we need to look for and be thinking differently about the hiring process? I think that's a critical piece for everybody today.
Yeah, I absolutely love this question. And as you know, I've had the distinct pleasure for the last 5 years to travel and talk about the future of the workforce. So I've been tracking this data for quite some time. There's this piece that says people don't want to work. And I was just speaking to a group of doctors in Kentucky 2 weeks ago, chiropractors in Kentucky. And I said, raise your hand out of this room full of doctors. Raise your hand if you actually know 5 people that just don't want to work. Absolutely just do not want to work. And no hands go up. And raise your hand if it's 4 and raise your hand if it's 3. And when I got to 2 hands went up. When I got to 1, a few more hands went up. Not everybody. Less than half the room actually raised their hand. So over the course of this conversation, less than half of the room actually firsthand knows someone that doesn't want to work or doesn't want to contribute. So the first thing is we're giving so much power to the thought that people just don't want to work. And that's not true. By nature, we want to feel a part of something. We want to feel accomplished. But to your point, this generation watched their parents work for 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And at the end of it, that golden parachute that was promised isn't there. And the previous generations were able to watch their parents work and see that golden parachute. And so when you see someone kind of give what they have to a work cause in this case, and then they're rewarded on the back end, you look and say, okay, I can see that. I see what we're working towards. But if we're in a society now where there really is no loyalty, and there just isn't, you really have to work hard to find it, then you have a workforce that's disenfranchised. You add to that workforce that's disenfranchised, and you have a greater wage disparity now than there's ever been in the US, meaning the haves are crushing it, absolutely crushing it. Stock market's as high as it's ever been. If you have a retirement plan, it's up there, but you have to have those things. Fewer than 10% of Americans are poised to retire with $1 million. So the average person's working. So the average person doesn't have loyalty, and the kids who are out now don't even want to get on the hamster wheel because they don't see a path to win. So that's really what we're fighting today, is the value set is entirely different because they see pain in a different way. So first we have to recognize that the value set has shifted because they're all free agents, and they're free agents because employers have been free agents. And really this goes back into the 80s. And sadly, what was really heralded with, say, Jack Welch type running of a business and firing the bottom 10% regularly, well, 30 years later, guess what? People listened. And that loyalty has planted a seed now that people just don't trust. So that's one of the problems. But here's the other issue. When we started small businesses, they were to do a little bit better, to have a little bit more autonomy than maybe if you worked for someone else. So in my neighborhood in the 70s, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a very small house. It was 900 square feet. But if you just went 2 blocks away, there were Brady Bunch style houses with business leaders. Well, now those two groups don't live in the same neighborhood. You know, the group of the have-not lives way over here, and the groups of the haves live way over here. And if you need to see proof of it, go look at a suburban football field versus an inner city football field, and just look at the resources that are kind of going on there. So when you have this huge wage disparity and you have people who don't believe, and then you're hiring the per hour person, which we are, so they're kind of towards the bottom, you have to find something that makes them fall in love emotionally with what's going on. They have to believe. You have to help them unpack that chip on the shoulder. On top of that, you're adding some things that never existed. Very few of us would have ever just quit a job without showing up. For those of us who had parents that were around, whether it's a parent or parents, I couldn't imagine telling my mom that I quit a job without showing up.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm still afraid. I'm 50. And I'm afraid she's 80. And I'm afraid to tell her that today.
She'll kick
But
your butt.
yes, absolutely would kick my butt. She can't do that today either. And so you start to add into that technology and ghosting and social norms that have all come into play in this free agent world. Then you add into it this social world where everyone's trying to show off. So everybody has to have something. Everybody's life has to have something. That's what we've been sold. We really have a perfect storm right now for what we're dealing with in the hiring going forward. It's why character is so important. And it's also why 25% of the people listening to this podcast should be afraid. And I mean it. Because 50 to 75% of us are going to listen to people like me and know that the terrain has shifted all the way through the way that we're communicating with our younger employees. And then if you're not adjusting, you're going to lose. You will lose. And that's the person who's out there saying, nobody wants to work. I can't get anyone. Those things aren't true. People are either running from something or they're running to something. We do have a shortage on employees. We're down people. And so if we have a shortage, supply and demand, the demand is high for good employees. The good employees are going to go to the places that have created a good environment. Think about that. The good employees are going to go to the places that have created a good environment. People are either running from something or running to something. So you need to look at yourself today and know that while the demand is short, you have to adjust your environment. Do you have a fun environment? Would you want to work for you? Would you want to work with you? And if you can't say a resounding yes, then your employees probably aren't either.
Yeah, but it's like my good friend, Dr. Drew Cephalou, when we would get down to hiring someone, when we get to the end, our decision process, it's either a hell yes or a hell no. And so, you really got to, for an employee, from the employee's perspective, when they look at your company, one of the things that we do internally when we hire someone, we don't just do the interviewing. We have the entire rest of our team spend time with them so they can see the environment, so they can hear from them. And I think that makes a big difference. Well, Aaron, as I said, we could go on for probably the rest of the day and tomorrow. Thanks for spending some time with us, and thank everyone else for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future or what topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to deliver. If you want to learn more about Chiro Health USA and how we can help you develop a profitable discount strategy that will grow your practice, increase your income, and most importantly, your profitability, call us at 1-888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com to find out why Chiro Health USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Make it a great day.